Hello, listeners. Welcome back to another episode of Lit Happens. Today we have a Teacher Talks episode all about the notion of feedback in our subjects. And as always, we've got the co-host, the fabulous Adriel, with us. Hello, Adriel. How are you?
I'm good, thanks, Bill. I've been away for a few weeks whilst you've been recording away, so it's nice
you
to
had
be
a
back.
magnificent trip.
Yeah, it was good just to sort of get away. Life's been a little bit busy, as many teachers will attest to. So, nice to be back behind the screen, and hopefully the dulcet tones. I don't even know if it's dulcet tones of my voice, but hopefully they do give us some feedback. Do you remember
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, do you remember Mix 106.5? They used to have like love song dedications back in the day. What was it? With Richard Mercer?
Yes, Richard Mercer. Yes. Yeah.
Goodness me.
And tonight on Love Song Dedications, this one is going out too. That's the best.
I wonder if he's still around. I don't even listen to the radio anymore, but like, because we're all listening to podcasts and different sort of music just on Apple CarPlay for most of us these days, but I wonder if old Richard Mercer's going around at the moment. Yeah, I don't attest for my voice.
It would be amazing.
Yes, what's that?
If we could get, like, you know, when you go on the socials and they can do like an AI voice for your text, but if we could have the Richard Mercer version, I would use that in all our socials, all of them.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
So good.
That'd be actually cool.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
That'd be cool.
Anyway,
oh gosh,
we digress. Yeah. But no, it's good that I'm glad you took that holiday. Like, we all need that reprieve and that R&R. And I think anytime you can get away in school holidays, even a few days makes a difference, don't you think? So, no, you did the right thing. We need to take care of ourselves. And it's also nice to like parcel out some time where we just do something for fun, because most of us will spend the school holidays also working, but you need to do those things. So obviously, guys, if you're listening, then you'll note that we've obviously come back from school holidays. We're a couple weeks in as we record this episode, and we hadn't done a Teacher Talks episode in a while. We could just discuss a topic in education, both from a student and a teacher perspective. So we're just going to throw that out there this morning, aren't we, Adriel?
Yeah, yep. It'll be interesting because feedback is a massive field in our pedagogy, and it's something that we could either roll our eyes to. Shout out to our old head teacher. He used to be the professional eye roller. Or we can look at
she was also the feedback queen.
Yeah, she did love her feedback. I think I started rolling my eyes sometimes when she spoke about it, but she definitely was good with it as well. So we'll talk about a few different approaches to feedback. Yeah, 100%.
100%. No, that's good. So we might start then first, as we did last time in our segment. We're going to try and break down more of a student-focused feedback question for about 10-15, and then we'll switch to the teacher version. So here we've got our student question for today, guys. It says, I get feedback, but I don't know what to actually do with it. My marks aren't improving. So that's a really, really common one that we hear from students. So I guess we want to, they're sort of looking at, how do I move from vague kind of suggestions or comments to mastering feedback in a way that they can actually produce, close to or aiming towards that band 6 response. So I think, so it sounds to me like it's maybe they're sort of wondering, how do I add some sophistication into my writing? Like, what are your initial thoughts so far?
Yeah, I think feedback is quite like, it's how you use it, and that's probably the important thing for all students. I mean, if we're looking at feedback, sometimes we don't, as an individual, we don't like being told what we need to do, and sometimes we, seek this, I want to do more, you get told this is what you need to continue to do, but then you have that, you add that but as a student, but I have been doing this. Well, how long have you been doing it, and how long have you been working away? Like, feedback is a continual process. It's not just a one and done type of thing where it's like, yep, cool, I've added one word here and I should now get a band 6. It's a process of going back to the drawing board over and over again, chipping away, and eventually you get to piece of work, which still might not be the most perfect piece of work, but you are improving. And I think that's what feedback is essential for. It's about that process of improvement. And I think that's one of the things that we need to sort of move our perspective away from. I know,
Mhm.
for example, if we're looking at more sophistication, students will be like, well, how do you write in a more sophisticated manner? Or, one of the common things that we'll often write in students' responses for extended responses that they've submitted is more sophisticated sort of expression or more coherent expression. And students will often ask, like, well, how do I do this? And you'll engage with them.
Mhm.
And be like, well, how many drafts have you written? And I'm not just saying like being fixated on the words that you've already used, but how much other literature have you read? How much
Mm.
of the, I guess, university scholarly articles have you gone through and just looked at what good writing looks like? We do Mod C craft of writing, and obviously we focus a lot on creative writing, imaginative, discursive, and maybe some persuasive writing in the form of speeches, however, and reflective writing. But when it comes to our essay writing, and if we're looking for more sophistication, I think the first place to start off with our feedback for students is, well, look at your processes. Am I working away? Am I chipping away maybe once or twice a week at improving my sentences? Am I looking at implementing new sort of grammar and making use of punctuation or building my lexicon each week for my respective sort of unit? And I think that's one of the things that we need to start with if I was a student. It's like, well, what is this feedback
Mhm.
for? It's not a critique of who I am. It's not a critique of my character, but it's just there to help me improve my writing. And I feel like once we can step away from this being, well, I keep on trying and I never improve, to, hang on, although my mark may not show it, I feel as though, and it's that feel, I feel as though my writing is becoming more and more comfortable. And you'll feel when that feeling starts to encroach and come on board, eventually, who knows, you'll have the aha moment one day. And it could be in high school, it could be in university later on down the track. Could be like me when I got into my teaching career, where I actually started to understand extended writing a lot more, and appreciate a lot more as my brain matured a bit more. I think this is that thing. Like, feedback is a lifelong process. Learning is a lifelong process, and you can see that they go hand in hand. Feedback and learning. It's about looking for areas to improve on, and then understanding that you can always improve on those areas. And this is why you're looking. You see how
Mhm.
like both of those areas go together. Yeah, so
Definitely.
I think that's
I
that's very important. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, no, I think you're right. And I find a lot of the students often think that feedback is they're expecting to see this is good or this is wrong or this is
Mm,
incorrect or put this in here instead. And that, I think, maybe in the junior years is more common, but I think as they get into the senior years, your teachers don't want to tell you what to write.
mm, mm,
They want it to be your ideas and your voice. So the feedback, rather than saying this sentence is good or it's correct or it's
mm,
incorrect, will actually start giving you more suggestions. And
mm.
they're always going to be, like you said too, suggestions of improvement. And so I think that's what stumps students, because it takes a lot of work for them to
Yeah.
interpret that suggestion and then put it into practice. But
Mm,
you talked about the multiple drafts. Like, that's the other thing I think students miss. Like, they think they've gotten feedback and that's that.
mm,
But really,
mm.
once you've tried to address that feedback, then you should be showing it again, if
Yeah.
possible. Like, I know
Yeah.
obviously during assessment period that might be a bit tricky depending on whatever
Yeah.
the school has decides as their policy. But
Yep.
we always advocate that they should be writing like this before the assessment task.
Of course.
So therefore you do have an opportunity, and there's no reason why you shouldn't be, circling or commenting back to your teacher, I'm not exactly sure what this piece
Mm,
of feedback is. Could you please
mm.
explain it in another way? Yeah. I feel
Yeah.
like the students think, unless it says on there, this is all fantastic or this is all wrong,
Yeah.
like there's a black, yeah, they feel like it's kind of got to be black and white. That's not
Mm.
really the point of feedback. The point of feedback is not to shut you down, it's to help you to evolve and consider your writing and see how
Yeah.
you can adapt it. And so that is a skill in itself. And you made a
Mm.
great point. if you're not engaging in this process, you're not going to know how to engage with feedback because you're not
Yeah.
doing it regularly enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I also find that different teachers will have like a different language. Like I know I've got certain phrases that I prefer to use in my feedback for certain things, and another teacher
Yeah.
might have a different phrase. So, you do have to, and that's where you have to talk to your teacher. You can't just, I got the feedback and I changed
Yeah.
one thing, so I've addressed the feedback. It doesn't,
Yeah.
if you have gotten 5, 6, 7 different comments, that means that you need to make at least 5, 6, 7 different
Yeah.
adjustments to properly address it. I remember Age or you and I one year, a while ago now, we actually were getting quite exhausted providing feedback to all our
Yeah.
seniors and having
Yeah.
them not address a thing. And then, you fall into that pattern of, well, why am I giving this feedback? I'm
Yeah.
doing this at home when I should be sleeping or when I should be doing
Yeah.
XYZ. And then we ended up creating a bit of like a checklist where the
Yeah.
students had to self-assess and select from a list of 5 to 10 different things, what they wanted feedback
Yeah.
on. And we gave them feedback on that specific, because sometimes I know I love to give feedback across an entire piece, but for some
Yeah.
students, it goes in one ear, out the other. Maybe for some
Yeah.
of them, it is better, if you're a student and you know that you're working on expression, maybe you say to your teacher, could you focus the feedback, please, on my expression? Or if you think that your analysis is not great, could you say, could you focus on how I'm using my technique or how I'm engaging with the purpose of this evidence? Like, I think the
Yeah.
onus is on students as well to reflect, not just I type something up and now it's all on you.
Yeah.
It's best practice as a student, I think, to pick
Yeah.
something, because then that shows the teacher that you are actually self-reflecting along the
Yeah.
way, and
Yeah.
the feedback's going to be so much more specific to what you think an area of need is. Like your teacher has 20 to 30 students,
Yeah.
and multiple classes. They can't possibly know the exact two things that every single student of the 150 kids they're teaching needs the feedback
Yeah.
on. Like we
Yeah.
will, as professionals, will have a handful of things that we know that on the whole of that class they're working on, but if you want that feedback to work with you, I think you need to also have that relationship. You used that word earlier, and I thought that
Yeah.
was great. It's
Yeah.
not just I typed up my first draft and now it's all on my teacher. You got to be deliberate about what you're asking, what you're producing, what you're discussing, and that's going to pay off, I think, for the student. Yeah, in the long
I
run.
I think you sort of touched on a
So what are
few good
maybe
things.
then some, as we started verging into practical shifts? Yeah. Yeah.
I think you touched on a few sort of good things there just then, where we often have students that fail to realize that the teachers have 5 classes, let's say, as a minimum, across a day. So not just the 11 or 12
Yeah.
students, which means a teacher's brain is going from left, right, east, south, north, west. And sometimes you bring an essay to them
Yeah.
and you expect them to sort of give you, I'm gonna challenge this a little bit, maybe like a personal tutor type feedback. There's a big difference between a teacher and a personal tutor, and they're two very different
Yes.
fields in the field of education. Tutoring is where you will expect to ask those very deep, personal, integrated knowledge questions with your tutor. However, a teacher is meant to lead you and guide you about concepts, ideas, understandings of how texts function. And it's up to you as a student to, use what you've learned from the teacher's class, supplement it with your own understanding and your own developing understanding, and then develop whatever the assessment tasks may ask for. Because the assessments, remember, are an indication of where you guys are at in terms of your learning for a unit. So it's very, very important for
Yeah.
students to really understand the distinction there. I find like some students may, and props to them, they do a lot of work, but they're just waiting on the teacher to tell them, but they
Yeah.
don't chip away constantly at home. And I think that onus does fall upon them where I think there's this like 80-20 method sometimes, where sometimes a student will want to focus on 100% of everything they want to do to try and fix everything. But it's not possible, because you've joined or you've come into a field
No.
or a unit of work at different levels of learning. So look at the 20%. What can you actually immediately address? So will it be something like improving
Mm.
maybe just the clarity of how you express your ideas? Because that can often become one thing. I know, like, for example, if we say your writing needs to be more sophisticated, students will just go and get like bigger words, and then they have no idea what they're writing. That's not
Yeah.
necessarily more
Yeah.
sophisticated writing. That's actually just embellishing for the sake of embellishing your writing, and it will come at the cost of the clarity of your writing and actually what are you actually saying. And I'll often ask my
Yeah.
student, I'll read our students, I'll read their work. I'm like, well, what are you actually trying to say in this sentence? At the sentence level. And
Yeah.
sometimes they'll an hour and they'll give me a whole like lecture on this one sentence, like, it's about this or that or whatever. And we'll get to like one main point. I said, why don't you just mention that? You know, and it's like,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah. Yes.
okay, like, and then this probably
Sometimes I
is a
think they're
nice
gonna make
little.
it more complicated.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, exactly. They think big words are going to make it sound good and make
Mhm.
it a band six sophisticated sort of response right off the bat. Well, it's not going to be a band six
Mm.
response if you don't understand what you're saying, or if it's not clear what your
Yeah.
purpose is. So those are some
Yeah.
things that I would say are a good segue into, I guess, even like the next little part for us, where we're sort of talking about, you know, how much feedback should we give as teachers compared to, how much should we
Mm.
model, for example. I know in the EDI framework, when we're looking at explicit direct feedback, you're going to have like a teacher guided example, and then, students will do their own practice. And I think that's really good, because it does model the response for students. However, there can be some sort of, if you've got the students that are just like focused singularly on everything that you're doing as a class, and they'll be like, "Well, I ticked off everything that you did. How come I still didn't get a band six, sir?"
Yeah.
I'm like,
Good point.
okay,
Mhm.
like, so there's a fine balance between written feedback, and it goes back to what we're sort of saying. Written feedback and the model example. So, for example, if we were to bring up an essay, and I haven't brought one up on the screen at the moment, but let's say we're focusing on an introduction. And with the introduction writing, you've looked at thesis statements, whether it be at the start of your introduction or the end. You're looking at, the introduction of, the introducing of the text, or introducing of some of the sub ideas that you're going to be speaking about through the body of your essay. That's three different things that I've mentioned there. Now, in that 80-20 method, you probably might give them a modeled example of, let's say, a thesis statement, but then you're going to expect your students, well, you've got your main idea now, start to work on how you can form the rest of your essay, given whichever structure you
Mhm.
may be using in your respective
Mhm.
school. And in my current place of education, we use a GST method for our introduction writing, which is like a general statement, specific statement, and then your thesis statement, which I think is a good sort of
Mhm.
easy
Just a little
way into
scaffold.
writing.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's right. Into writing that introduction. It's part of the writing revolution, if anyone's interested. Some good stuff online there, which we're implementing in my current place of work. So there's some good stuff there. But again, we want to focus on one or two things. Now, here's the thing: we've got a 10-week term to teach you a lot of this stuff. And in that 10-week term, remember, teachers need to teach five other subjects, not subjects, five other classes within the subject, amongst many other things that students probably don't understand, that comes along with teaching. So we may not get the time to go in depth in terms of our feedback, in terms of our written feedback.
Yes.
This
Yes.
means there is a lot of earnest that needs to fall on you as a student, if you're listening today,
Yeah.
to,
Yeah.
put together some methods for yourself, some routines for yourself. And we always say it's like consistency and chipping away. It's not just that one and done thing. So the way to actually utilize my feedback effectively, a few points that I just want to quickly just summate here, is focus
Mm.
your attention. What is it that really needs your attention? It could be something simple as getting your clarity correct, making sure your point is coming across clearly. How will you do that? Well, I need to simplify my sentences. How can I make them more complex after? Well, start off with a simple sentence, make sure I really understand what I'm saying, and then move forward. Have a read of some scholarly material. Look at the way that they express themselves and look to maybe mimic that type of writing. I'm not saying copy
Yeah.
in terms of copy and paste, but I'm saying mimic that style of writing. And see, slowly, slowly,
Mhm.
you're improving that area, that 20% of expression. But it goes beyond the 5 to 10 minutes that you're going to spend with your teacher, maybe even less that your teacher has to give you some feedback. So you need to be doing 90% of the work in terms of the way you implement your feedback if you're a student. And I think that's
Yeah.
probably a really good starting point for us if I am a student. Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think as a student, you are doing yourself a disservice if you're asking for feedback on an essay, let's say, and you're still struggling with essay structure,
Yeah.
or you're still struggling with the clarity of sentences. Like,
Mm,
your teacher cannot possibly bridge that gap for you. They're not
no.
doing your assignment. They're not, like you
Yeah.
said, your personal tutor. And
Yeah.
so you do have to have that responsibility to come up to the plate with,
Yeah.
and we're not saying that everybody has to be an expert here, but I do feel really disheartened when I've got a kid complaining about feedback, for example, and they're
Mm,
still doing basic things like spelling errors and
yeah.
not structuring a paragraph properly. Like,
Yeah.
guys, you cannot, your teacher is there to guide. They're not there to sub in any skills that you're missing. And I think
Yeah.
one more thing before we move on to the teacher question is, if you are using AI to create your intros and your body paragraphs
Mm,
entirely, you're doing your skills a disservice. It's one
yeah.
thing when you can do it yourself, and then when you can do that skill and you're using AI and you're feeding it, and maybe you're just looking at comparisons or whatnot. It's an
Mm,
entirely
mm,
different thing when you're like, well, that's going to be my body paragraph, because you're not doing anything there. You're not engaging in any skills.
yeah.
Like, in the end, when it comes time for you to actually write on the spot and do the exams, like, I just think, I know it's easier. I know it saves students time. I know a lot of students are doing it. I want you to
Mm,
think about the long-standing repercussions, though. It's a bit different
yeah.
for our generation because we had to actually learn how to do these things.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now it's a skill that we have. And if we use AI, it's more about maybe saving time or giving us a new perspective. It's not
Mm,
replacing that skill
mm,
entirely. So, yeah, even if you're a bit younger and you're listening and you're in year 9 and 10, if you're using AI for all of your writing, I highly recommend you stop, because it's
yeah.
not going to serve you in the HSC. You need to know what you're talking about. And where AI is not you, AI is not an
Yeah.
English student in front of your teacher in your classroom. It's just, I just can't speak enough about replacing these skills.
Mm,
You
mm,
come to the table, I think, and then students who come to the table, they really reap the rewards, I think,
yeah.
Adriel.
Yeah. Yeah. I completely agree. It's good that you bring up that point on AI. Like,
Okay.
yeah, guys, remember, we don't want to be living in 1984 sort of Orwellian world, which we're
Yeah.
already sort of moving towards a lot more at the moment. So let's try and
Yeah.
heed some of the warnings that he provided in his novel, and
Yeah.
let's make sure we
Yes,
tap into our humanity, I guess, as
that's
well.
it.
Remember, human beings,
Yeah.
this is a beautiful thing about writing. It's an authentically humanistic sort of trait because we are expressing free
Yeah.
thought, and you're using
Yes.
your imagination, you're using the God-given creativity that you have, because it's just like we stifle that. And on the one hand, as a student, this is the big irony that we have in society at the moment is we don't want all of our thoughts and ideas to be stifled, and don't tell me what to do, and you can't tell me to do this, that, or the other. And then we go and ask AI, hey, can you do this for me?
Yeah,
Can you do this?
the
And
greatest
it's
yes, the
yeah.
greatest machine there is. Yeah.
Exactly. So that's the irony, isn't it? So yeah. But let's move on to our teacher question, I
Let's
guess.
get into the teacher one. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So our teacher question for the EP today is, how do I, as the teacher, give feedback that students can actually action without spending hours writing it? So I guess this idea, I love that, of actioning. So something that's practical, I guess, then that's clear that
Mm,
the student can interpret. And
mm,
is something that's achievable and fixable, and is not going to send the student into a tailspin because they're 3 hours into trying to address the feedback and they've talked themselves into circles and
Yeah.
are about to jump off the deep end. So, yeah, what's your
Yeah.
initial kind of reaction then to this teacher question? It's a very
Yeah.
good one. It's one that
Yeah.
I remember asking myself for my first few years. Like, I still ask it, but definitely that first few years, Angel, I remember having this feeling like, well, I know this is the task and I know that they have to do it. But like, if they were to ask me, how do I do that? And I don't know, like, I felt like I had to upskill myself in those first few years. Like, well, what do I kind of somewhat expect them to do? And then how is that going to guide whatever feedback I give?
Mm, mm, mm. I think one of the big things, I had this discussion with one of my colleagues right now. She's an early career
Mm-hmm.
teacher,
Mm-hmm.
and we looked at like the process of giving feedback when you're young and you're in the classroom and you've I don't know. I don't know if it's because I'm a little bit older now. I have this attitude where the kids get what they get. You know what I mean? Because that is the authenticity of where they're at. Sometimes we try to what's the word? I'll say embellish where students are at with the amount of feedback that we give them. So we'll tell them what to write instead of actually giving them meaningful feedback,
Mm.
because we start to think
Mm.
that their marks are a representation of us as a teacher. So
Mm.
that's something that I've definitely been thinking about recently. And I think it's something that we need to sort of, I don't know if it's because I'm a little bit older, and it's not that I don't care about my students and their learning, but I don't care about what mark they get. What I care about
Care
is
about the process. Mm.
the learning process, and you've sort of just mentioned that here. It's the mark doesn't define the student. What the mark does is it
Mm.
just gives you an indication, and it's one part of an indicator as to where a student is.
Mm.
Now, I know that there are other pressures that can be involved depending on your teacher environment, whether it be parents, putting pressure on the
Yeah.
teacher, whether it be. So I completely understand all of this, but remember, you're an educator. Right, your job isn't to get students to this unrealistic level of where the world wants them to be. Your job is to take them from where they're at, which could be very low, to maybe adding value in one certain area of their writing. And I think this comes back to that process where you've just mentioned, sometimes we'll spend hours trying to address every single thing a student needs to do, but that can be overwhelming for a student, and it'll take you 3 hours to actually do one paper.
Mm-hmm.
Look at, like we've just said, with the 80-20 method for the feedback for students. As a teacher, I would ask the student, well, where do you feel like you need to improve the most? And you
Yes.
might give them 3 areas, because that's a very general, vague question. And for a younger
Mm-hmm.
student, it may be very, well, I need to improve on everything. Now, where do you need to
Yeah.
improve on in terms of the clarity of your response for doing essay writing? How well you've written your topic sentences? How well have you integrated evidence or used the techniques that the author or the respective developer, creator of the text has used to convey purposes in their pieces? How clear is your message or your thesis statement? Like, those are 3 or 4 areas. Now, I would go to a student and I would say to them, okay, out of these 3, you tell me, which one of these 3 areas do you want the most help with? Where do you feel like you're lacking the most?
Yeah.
And sometimes I'll lead them to it. I'll be like, oh, maybe it's this one, but you've got a choice. So give them the choice, because you want them to have some ownership over their learning. But honestly, if you do that, it will give you a far more focused approach. And that's where you can also tell
Mm-hmm.
them, hey, we've got a lot of work to do, but we need to chip away from the beginning. And then slowly we improve our
Yeah.
skills, our skills, our skills, until we get to a point where, you may not be at the upper echelons of marks, but come time for university, come time for life later on, you've developed a maturity because you appreciate the process of learning. And I think that's so important for our teachers to understand, that the mark
Yeah.
is not a representation of your teaching ability or your worth.
Yeah.
And some people will argue with me and say, well, yes, it is, because, it's showing what you're doing in the classroom. I guarantee you this, every single teacher that's probably listening to this, you put in so much work and so much effort into getting the kids to where they're getting. along with all the administrative work that you have to do, along with having to deal with behavior, along with having to become a personal counselor for the students, and the list goes on. The list goes on.
Yeah.
So you can't tell me that you're not building students. Like, our role as an educator is not just to obviously focus solely on just our KLA, which is a big focus, but we're working on building holistic students, and you're building young human beings to be effective adults in the world beyond the school life. And I think when we start to understand that a little bit, we will start to put less pressure on ourselves, and we start to move
Yeah.
into, okay, what is the things that we need to build effective sort of young human beings. And again, if you take it with just these little bite-sized sort of moments, in the long run, you're probably still adding more value to that student's life than giving them 300 pages worth of feedback and them not knowing what to do with it, because then you spend 600 hours trying to
Yeah.
explain what you've written, like, so I think it starts with that shift in
Absolutely. No,
perspective.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, for sure, because there's almost like levels of the feedback, right? So like
Yeah.
your lower level might be the actual overall structure and just
Yeah.
general clarity, and then you're moving into you like if it's an essay, the argument, or if it's some creative, the actual conflict or the tension, and then you get in that upper echelon where you're like the synthesis, the sophistication. And I think we as teachers, we kind of know roughly what level our kid might be at. And I love
Yeah.
your suggestion of like 3 things in action, because not only is specific and practical for the students, and so time is so critical, especially at the moment as education is progressing. I mean, there are lots of strategies that I have seen used. Like sometimes I find a faculty will make a decision on, this is how much feedback we give and this is when we give it and this is our time frame, and that kind of keeps everyone in line or at an equal footing, so that you don't have students complaining, I got too much or too little or this or that. So I've seen that happen. I've seen some teachers develop like their own strategies where they might just color code. So they might have a color, like a highlight color for context and a highlight color for evidence, and they might just draw them to specific areas. I've seen checklists used. I think there's, like you said, so much variety because we all do very different things at our schools with our very different students and our very different leaderships, and even the focus of that year and what's in our school plan will engage that. But I think it is quite hard, to be honest, for students to adapt to a variety of styles of feedback. Like I know this year I've been doing literacy support, intensive literacy support instead of straight classroom English. And I was supporting a student looking at their teacher's feedback, and their teacher gave brilliant feedback, amazing feedback. This was a young student, only about like early stage 5. And, what was good was like I said to them, so out of these, let's say 5, 6 points that your teacher gave you, which of those do you understand and can actually action? They're like, oh, yeah, these ones. And then, they said to me, I just don't understand these 2. Now, given that it was my KLA, I could interpret easily what that teacher was saying and just say to the kid, oh, you just got to do maybe this. But I think it was a really good note even for me, think about when I give feedback, that sometimes what I think I've given is clear, but might not necessarily be that. I might have written that in my English teacher jargon per se, and that doesn't necessarily translate. Now, props to this kid because they did go back and ask their teacher, and so what they did was they tried their best, they amended what they could, and then they went back again and clarified everything. But a lot of students don't do that, and I guess the onus is on them to do that. But it did make me think like about when I would give feedback, is there something more straightforward I can say that's less Englishy, teachery, and more just general, clear, straight to the point, so the kid's like, aha, all right, I know I have to do that, so now I'm just going to try my best to do that. Just something to think about for sure. It made me reflect. Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, I think probably the last thing we can sort of just end on this for our teachers is instead of just thinking that you can give every single kid individualized feedback, think about what you can give to 80% of the class
Yes,
as a whole. So, sometimes I'll often have to stop the class and be like, hey, listen up, everyone, because this is for everybody.
Yeah.
Or you might be in the form of
Yeah,
a sheet.
you're all struggling or whatever.
That's right.
Totally.
And then you might then guide it and be like, everyone pay attention. Like when you know that there are certain things that kids are struggling with. So what are the things that you can give to every single student? And make sure you sort of address those, because that will cover most of the boxes. And that means in that 20% that we've always been discussing, then we can get into more of the nitty-gritty stuff for each individualized student. Now, again, I would say don't burden yourself to the point where you're just spending hours on end, because you need to have that work-life balance. And then this is where you will give the kids a choice. Well, what do you want feedback on? Give them a few focus areas. You discussed, we had like a feedback sheet that we used to give our students, which were, numbers, tell us 3 areas and we'd give them different areas, specify which areas you want feedback in, and we can just look at those in their responses. We won't focus on anything else. And it's up to the student then to, apply what they've learned with the overall feedback they've been given as a class, what they've learned themselves, what they can go out and research themselves as well. And then that's that whole process of feedback. It's not just a singular lens through your teacher. Your teacher is one avenue. You as a teacher are one avenue, and then the student does need to find other avenues as well as to how they better improve themselves. We know that life is holistic. There's a whole heap of different perspectives that shift and shape the fabric of our identity. And I think when we understand that, you start to understand the picture. Well, everything that my teacher tells me will only allow me to improve 10%. Whereas if I look at every other area that I can improve in, then I can address the other 90%. So it's something that's quite interesting. Like we can continue to talk about this for days on end, but hopefully we've provided a few just practical strategies for both students and teachers in this little discussion.
No, I think you've wrapped us up there on the best note. Like, it is give and take. It is that relationship, and it is a process. And everyone's genuinely really like trying their best here. Like, we know teachers are trying their best with feedback. We know that a lot of students are engaging, but it is that process. Feedback is meant to move you forward. So as a student, always think about, like you said, all the bits of feedback I get. It's not just the explicit feedback from the teacher. It's what you hear in the classroom. It's what you perceive yourself. It's the feedback you get from your peers. And I think it's a great point to end on, that idea of the holistic nature of it. And I think we'll wrap that today's episode up there, Adriel. Yeah. Fabulous. So you'll see our banner down here, guys, with all our socials for you to access. We've got our website. We're going to be doing a bit of a revamp on that, but we've got our website with some free resources, and also you'll find that we've been posting some of our resources that we're creating up on Teachers Pay Teachers, that we're just hoping is going to save you all some time so you can get back to the beauty of what you do in the classroom. But as always, thanks for listening, and we'll catch you guys next time.